Hey everybody, we are picking up in our I Am Bible study following the message from this past week. And today we're going to be looking at the second of 7 I Am statements that Jesus made. 7 being the number of completion. He was completely saying through these statements that he and God are one, that he is the I Am, that God introduced himself as in chapter 3 of Exodus when he first gave his name, his business card name to his people. So today we're going to be picking up in John. They're all in the book of John, by the way. We're in John chapter 8, starting out in verse 10. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." I am the light of the world. See, the context, it's important to understand the context of this scene in the scripture. John chapter 7 indicates that Jesus was headed to Jerusalem for a feast. It was one of the fall feasts. And this feast was a big deal. It was the Feast of Tabernacles. This was a feast where the Jewish people of the time would head to Jerusalem. They would go to the temple area and they would celebrate God providing shelter for the Israelites after the Exodus. So it was a big deal. A lot of people were there, big audience. And they would be in the temple area. And in this scene, what scholars believe, many agree that this was likely happening, this particular scene with the woman that the leaders brought before Jesus. See, they brought this woman before Jesus and they had accused her of being caught in the act of adultery, which was an interesting thing, by the way, because they brought her before Jesus and wanted Jesus to pronounce judgment on her, that she would be stoned. And the interesting thing is, by Jewish law, they should have brought the guy too, but the guy was nowhere to be found. It was just this woman. But the fascinating thing is that scholars believe she was likely brought into the court of women during this Feast of Tabernacles. See, there were 3 courts in the temple, and the most outer court was the court of the Gentiles. That's where I'd be hanging out if I was there in that time. That's for the outsiders, if you will. And then there's the next court, that's the court of women. So Gentiles were allowed in the outer court, women were allowed in the middle court, and then the Jewish men were allowed in the third court. So this was likely happening in the court of women, where these religious leaders dragged this woman in before Jesus and said, "What do we do with her? She was caught in the very act of adultery." And so Jesus was already making waves, and they were trying to catch him in a trap to see what he would say. So the context, also an interesting context here, is that this court of women had these massive light poles, if you will, these big giant candles up to about 40 feet high. So they were lit each day during the Feast of Tabernacles, and they would provide light in the afternoon when it started to get dark out, or at dusk for the people when they gathered around. So there are these giant 40-foot high candles, if you will. Think of it like a big well-lit parking lot. And this is the scene where it likely took place, where these religious leaders dragged this woman in to try and entrap Jesus. So light surrounding him in the court of women, which is interesting. They brought this woman to the very court where she should have been welcomed, but they brought her there to condemn her. The reason the light is so significant, and the lights that were in this court that were likely lit during this scene, is because these lights during the Feast of Tabernacles that were lit were a symbol of the Shekinah glory of God filling the first temple, but also a symbol of looking forward to the promised Messiah who would provide light to the world. So again, here we have these religious leaders dragging this woman in the very court that she should have been welcomed in, underneath the lights of the promised Messiah who would save the world from sin. Such irony. The place where she should have been welcomed, in the midst of the lights blazing 40 feet high, a symbol of the promised Messiah. And there was the promised Messiah, Jesus, the I am. And what did Jesus do? What did Jesus do for her? He absolved her. He withheld his judgment. He said, look, if none of you have sinned, then go ahead and throw a stone. And each one of them dropped the stone, it says from the oldest to the youngest. And he withheld judgment from the woman. And then he said, I am the light of the world. So the first thing we learn from this I am statement is it means that God, Jesus, came to forgive you, to forgive me, to forgive those around us. That he has withheld his rightful judgment, that he is the light of the world, that he stayed the stones that today you might be throwing at yourself, the stones that maybe have been thrown at you, the stones that maybe you wanted to throw at other people in this season. Jesus, what he did here when he said, I am the light of the world, in the midst of the lights, in the court of the women, he said, stay the stones, because I am the light of the world. So the first thing we learn about this statement is that Jesus is not judging you. He's not judging me. He's not judging those around us. He absolves you, as he did that woman in that scene. The second thing that we learn about this I am statement comes in the next chapter, John chapter 9. And it's during the same Feast of Tabernacles, and it's on the Sabbath day where you weren't supposed to do any kind of work. You weren't supposed to heal anyone. Jesus was always rocking the boat with that. And there was a man who was born blind. And we read that Jesus healed this man who was born blind. And before he heals him, in verse 5 of John 9, he says, while I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So the second thing we learn from this man in John chapter 9 that Jesus was about to heal, and right before he healed him, he said, I am the light of the world again. Here's someone, all they can see is darkness. They have no way to see clearly. And Jesus says, I am the light of the world, to indicate that he's the only way to see clearly. And maybe today you find yourself in a dark time. Maybe today you find yourself surrounded by dark things, dark thoughts, hopelessness. Would you hear him say to you, I am the light of the world? An interesting thing about Jesus' statement here, I am the light of the world, actually in the book of Revelation, in chapter 21, verse 23, it reads, the city does not need the sun, speaking of heaven. The city does not need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and the Lamb is its lamp. What that verse means is that when we get to heaven, the source of light is God. The lamp is Jesus. Jesus is the light of heaven. Jesus is the light of this world. And maybe you need to hear Jesus say that to you today in one of these two scenarios. Maybe you need to hear him say to you, like the woman, I am the light of the world. I am the one who tells those who want to judge you to stay the stones, to hold back the stones. I am the one who does not judge you. I am the one who rescues you when you feel like you're being judged. I am the one who tells the crowds to stay the stones. I am the one who comes to your aid. I am the one who forgives you. I am the one who provides you relief from judgment. Or maybe you need him to say to you today, I am the light of the world. I am the one who will help you see clearly in the midst of darkness. Whatever the case may be, may you hear him say to you today, I am the light of the world. What's God saying to you? Love you all and have a great rest of your day and week.